What if the goal you're chasing is quietly grading your worth? We learned early that the answer to feeling stuck is to set bigger goals, push harder, and trust that the results will prove we mattered. But the anxiety that shows up after you've done everything right isn't coming from the goal itself. It's coming from what that goal secretly measured, which is whether you still feel like enough when the numbers on the screen don't move. The fix isn't to want less. What you need is to change what kind of goal you're holding, because the kind of goal you set determines whether you end up anxious or free. So here's the part almost nobody talks about. The goal on your list stopped being a simple target a long time ago, and it quietly turned into a test of your value while you were busy doing the work. When you hit the target, you feel like you're finally enough. When you miss it, the same feeling flips into its exact opposite. Psychologists call this an ego goal, and it's one of the oldest patterns they've found in how people approach their work. When your goal becomes a way to prove something about who you are, the anxiety doesn't come from the work itself. It comes from the possibility that the work might expose you as someone who wasn't good enough to begin with. And this is why the standard advice feels so hollow. Set bigger goals, track your metrics, and visualize the outcome. It all assumes the problem is a lack of motivation. But the real problem is that your goal has quietly merged with your self-evaluation. And now every number on the screen is grading who you are. The revenue target stopped being a number. It turned into a verdict on whether you're the kind of person who can build something that lasts. The promotion timeline stopped being a plan. It became a judgment on whether you've earned your place in the room. And even the weight on the scale becomes a daily referendum on your discipline, your value, and your right to feel okay about who you are. This is what I mean by a worthiness goal. It's any goal that stopped being about the outcome and started being about who you are instead. And once that switch happens inside you, the goal can't help but make you anxious, because anxiety is simply the body's normal response when it senses a threat to something you care about. And a threat to your worth is the deepest threat there is. The question isn't whether ambition itself is the problem. The real question is what a healthier relationship with goals actually looks like when you're sitting in the middle of a busy career with real bills to pay. And an ancient tradition that almost everyone misunderstands has more to say about your quarterly review than you might expect. People usually hear the word non-attachment and think it means giving up. They picture a monk on a mountain with no goals, no career, and no desire for anything better. But that's not what the Buddha taught. He taught the middle way, which is the path between rigid outcome, obsession, and passive resignation, where you stop caring about what happens. He wasn't anti-ambition, he was anti-suffering, and there's a real difference between the two. Non-attachment doesn't mean you stop caring about your work or your income. It means you stop letting the outcome decide how you feel about yourself. That's a small shift, but it has enormous consequences, because when your worth isn't on the line anymore, the goal becomes a direction instead of a threat, and the anxiety begins to loosen. The clarity returns, and you can finally think straight about what actually needs to happen next. The Buddha called this right effort. It's the practice of doing your work fully without clinging to the result, and it applies directly to the career you're building right now. In modern terms, that's the difference between a goal that owns you and a goal that serves you. And the moment you see the difference, you can't go back to the old way. One is a prison, the other is a compass. So here's what that looks like in practice. It looks like holding your goals with an open hand instead of a closed fist. You still move toward them with full commitment, and you still plan and prepare and show up with the same energy you've always brought to the work you care about. But you don't let the number on the screen tell you who you are. You're not giving up. You're just refusing to let a target grade your value as a person. That principle has a practical side, and it shows up in the simplest place you would expect, which is the moment you sit down and actually write your goals on the page. It looks like one simple shift in how you write your goals down. In 1997, researchers Kingston and Hardy ran a study with competitive golfers that still holds up today. They found that athletes who focused on process goals, which are goals about what to do in the moment, felt much less anxiety and kept sharper concentration than athletes who chased outcomes. A 2022 meta-analysis backed this up. Process goals and mastery goals produce more positive psychological effects than ego goals or outcome goals. So here's the reframe. Instead of making the outcome your goal, you make the skill your goal. And you let the outcome become the context, while the skill becomes the actual target you track. Take a revenue goal. The worthiness version sounds like, I need to earn $100,000 this year, and if I miss that target, it means I failed at something more fundamental than the number itself. The skill version sounds like, I will practice identifying one new revenue opportunity every single week, and I will track how many conversations I actually start. One is a verdict, the other is a practice. The same shift works for a promotion. I need to get promoted this year is a worthiness goal that puts your value in the hands of a committee you don't control, and it makes your sense of worth depend on a decision you can't fully influence. I will ask for feedback after my next 3 major projects is a skill goal. It puts your growth in your own hands. Here's the one exercise. Pick any goal you have right now and rewrite it using this sentence. I am practicing blank so that blank becomes more likely. The first blank is your skill. The second blank is your outcome. But the skill is the actual goal you're committing to day after day with real effort, and the outcome is just the surrounding context that gives it direction and meaning. Let's walk through one together. Maybe your goal is to lose 20 pounds. The worthiness version is, I need to lose 20-minute walk after dinner 4 nights a week so that my health becomes more likely to improve over time. You can see how the skill is in your control. That's the point. The reason this works is control. You can't fully control whether you earn $100,000 in a given year, and you can't control whether a committee decides to promote you or pass you over. You can't control the number on the scale, but you can control whether you practice the skill today. And that single difference is where the anxiety lives or dies. But knowing the reframe isn't enough by itself. Skill goals need something else to survive. A busy week when your calendar is already full. Your attention is split 3 different ways, and your willpower is running lower than you want to admit. Because here's what happens when life gets busy. The skill goal is clear, but the calendar is full and the intention is solid, while the follow-through breaks down under the weight of all the competing demands. That's where systems come in, and nearly everyone makes the same mistake of thinking systems require more willpower, when the whole point of a system is that it removes the need for willpower in the first place. A goal is a direction. A system is what you do when you don't feel like it, and it's the only real difference between a good intention and an actual behavior that moves the needle. If your skill goal is to practice identifying revenue opportunities, your system might be a 30-minute block on your calendar every Tuesday morning. If your skill goal is to walk after dinner, your system might be laying out your shoes before you eat. Systems don't require motivation. What matters is the environment you build around the behavior. You don't need to feel inspired to walk after dinner if your shoes are already by the door. And you don't need to force yourself to look for opportunities if the time is already blocked on your calendar. The system is your right effort, and the outcome is impermanent by its very nature, which means all conditions change, including the financial and career ones you care about most. You control the practice, but you don't control the result, and that isn't a weakness in your plan. It's the only part of the whole equation that you can actually hold on to when everything else shifts. That's the middle path in action. When the result changes, and it will, the system keeps you steady because it never depended on a single outcome in the first place. And that stability is exactly why the shift matters. The skill keeps you moving forward even when the external numbers don't move the way you wanted them to move in. The timeline you set, the worthiness goal, would have shattered under the same pressure. The skill goal just adjusts and keeps going. The anxiety isn't coming from wanting more. It's coming from making your goals grade your worth as a person. Pick one goal today and rewrite it as a skill you can practice this week. And then watch what actually shifts in how you feel when you sit down to work. If this helped, share it with someone who's navigating the same path. And subscribe, because we go deeper every